Thank you all for joining us bright and early today, for those that are in the room and those watching online and maybe watching even later on a recording. We're here today to tie up some loose ends that we had from our earlier budget hearing, where we had a few items that we paused on to do some further investigation, research, and consideration. And so those items were delegated to the Job Classification and Compensation Committee, which consisted of Todd, Carol, and Mary, along with Commissioner Brewer and Cecily. And so they have a report for us today. I'll share that we're down a member today. Todd suffered an injury that he's seeking, or not seeking, but he is receiving medical treatment for today and was unable to be with us. So we're down a member, and I'll have to rely on Carol and Mary to be the voice of the committee. So with that, looking at our schedule here, the first up was the prosecutor's budget, which, if you'll look in your books, I don't have the tabs marked. 17, okay. And we had a few items there. I guess I don't want to steal the committee's thunder, but we had a few items there that we had job reclassification requests, we had salary adjustments, we had a lot here. So I'll turn it over maybe to Carol as the spokesperson for the committee, and we'll begin that discussion.
I'll start, but I'll be relying on Cecily a lot for some details. So in this particular department, we discussed, and we basically came back with a recommendation that we wanted to stay with the salary midpoint or 3%. So everybody was going to the midpoint. If that midpoint did not get them 3%, we added it so that it would be 3%, so that everybody got at least a 3% raise. And so even though we know that some people might deserve a high point, our plan this year with this new survey that we did all this work on was to go to the midpoint. So that's where we're trying to stay. This particular budget came to us in our budget book with not too many requests. Then we received a later request, like the day before our first budget hearing. So in looking at it, we basically decided that we're sticking to our midpoint and our 3%. There was a question on one of the positions that had been difficult to fill, and when I did some research on that, I realized that it hadn't been empty that long, and it had only been empty a few months. And I know the prosecutor was concerned about that he wanted that position to be higher, and that it would make that other positions in the department would need to be higher as well because of their staff, and we understand that. But the spirit of our work was to go to this midpoint.
I guess for those watching online, Prosecutor Sommer is down with COVID, unable to join us today. And so Deputy Prosecutor Chris Vaughter is here today. Chris, what we normally have our speakers do is go to the podium so that the microphone will broadcast you on the YouTube recording. So to the extent that you have any comments in response, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, President Dunn. Thank you all for the work you've done on the committee. Mr. Sommer, as Mr. Dunn has indicated, is out today, so I am filling in. I do have some notes here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me. A couple of the main things, just the reason for the reclassification arose due to a vacancy in the office, so I know it was out of the standard procedure that's in place, but that reclassification arose due to a vacancy. At this point, the number of months has been growing. We did have a number of candidates, some internal and external, and so the salary really did become a problem for that position. One thing that my colleagues up in the office wanted me to reiterate, 6 years ago when the county chose to start working Thursday afternoons, the prosecutor's office continued to work 35 hours a week, unlike some of the other offices. So when we have internal candidates who are used to working 32 hours a week, that difference broken down per hour adds up for them, and so they wanted me to reiterate that to you. So the first point, again, we are asking, again, that the associate's degree requirement be included in that job description. All of our staff up there have an associate's degree, and I believe that aligns with the surveys done at the state level, and it aligns with the qualifications and skills necessary for the position. So we would ask that that be included. As far as the salary increases, I understand the formulas that were created and the budget that confines the council. Again, the prosecutor's office does have IPAC, the Prosecutor Attorney Council. They did their own surveys, and again, their surveys were based more aligned with the needs of our office. And so the $41,000 midpoint mark that the state or the county's salary survey produced is about $10,000 less than what the IPAC's and the statewide assessment was. And again, that assessment looked at more counties and aligned more with the needs of a prosecutor's office, looking at attorneys' offices and other prosecutors' offices. So those are the two main points. Again, we would ask that the job requirement to include an associate's degree moving forward be included. Find that to be in line with what's needed. And then the second point would be, again, I understand that we're trying to even out the board as far as the salaries, but again, the prosecutor survey was done specially and was included there. Just one more note that I'd like to add before I leave. We've also tried to reclassify. We had a deputy prosecutor who was a full-time prosecutor who's dropped to part-time, so there's been a savings there as far as what our office has actually used from what was budgeted for the last several months now, which could go towards that in future years. And finally, we've asked that our child support prosecutor be transitioned over to a full-time, and let me make sure I get the math right here. Just a reminder that child support prosecutors, the child support office actually gets the county reimbursed 66 cents on the dollar for those cases. And so having a full-time child support prosecutor, which we've not had, would allow that position to seek additional revenues for the neglected, the mothers or fathers out there who are not receiving their payments. And again, that position is reimbursed. So I'll leave it at that. If you guys have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you. Yes, Carol.
No, I appreciate that effort with the child support. I think that's a really big thing, and I applaud your office for taking care of that and making that bigger. I have a question about adding associate's degree. So is an associate's degree being added because it's necessary to do the work, or is the associate's degree being added to increase the pay?
The associate's degree, again, all of our employees already have that, and so I think it aligns more with the IPAC's survey out there of what the needs are for that type of paralegal position across the state board, and so it is necessary as someone who oversees the work of those paralegals. It is important that they have the skills necessary to do that.
Now, I want to follow up, and I'm going to ask maybe the same question in a different way because I'm not clear. Is the associate's degree a degree in some legal-related field or a certification, a paralegal? I don't know what the terminology would be, but is it related to the job?
I believe that would be the ideal candidate, but that's not what we're asking. It's just that it include the associate degree
Minimum
degree.
level
So you've achieved it. Again, I don't think out of the ones that we have in our current office, I don't know that all of them have a paralegal specific associate's level degree, but they do have an associate's degree of some sort. So I obviously, looking at candidates in the future, we would be looking at ones that have that as a selling point.
Okay, and I have one other question. I apologize. This may put you on the spot. As maybe you don't know this level of detail, but I don't know what our process is for advertising a position. So when you say it's been open for a while, how aggressively have we advertised it? Is it on Indeed and all those kinds of places, or how do we do that?
I know initially the openings are shared within county
Yes.
government, and
Yes.
then it's been opened up. I can't, obviously, with a limited amount of media in the community these days. As I remember when I was hired in 10 plus years ago, it was in the Frankfurt Times. Obviously, that's not really a viable source anymore, and so I don't know exactly. I know we
Okay.
post it. It's on our prosecutor's office Facebook page. I think the county's
Okay.
Facebook page has shared it, and so I do think it has been shared.
Okay,
And we've had external applicants that have seen it and have applied.
okay, good. Thank you.
Alan,
Yes.
I did yesterday via email, Tony and I discussed where he had posted it. And he has it posted on his Facebook page. He posted it the middle of August, and has not reposted it or posted it anywhere else because he was waiting for the salary decision. So that, as of right now, that's the only place. He said that once the decision's been made, then he would post it on, did you say ICAP?
Yeah, so the prosecutor attorney
IPAC.
conference, IPAC, they have a job description area where any county can post, whether it be deputy prosecutors or some staff positions. But like was just mentioned, I think a lot of it's waiting on a decision here to finalize who we can open it up to and if we need to change the job description.
I want our county to have the highest educated people working for our county and for the people in our county as much as we can. I want that. And I just, was asking the question about the associate's degree to make sure that, is that going to make it easier for you to hire somebody or harder for you to hire somebody?
We had a series of dominoes that would fall if we raised the salary on that one position, which by Tony's estimation necessitated some other salaries be adjusted to keep the right salary spread.
Yep.
Then that put one department being treated differently than the rest, that if we carried that same change through the remaining departments, really snowballed into something that was a very, very big number. And that was the challenge that we were having. And so I think the recommendation, as I understand it from the committee, was to say, let's hold the line for the moment. Let's maybe reevaluate this on a bigger scale as we, because I know there were other departments that maybe would like to go back and revisit some job descriptions as well. That could be done, again, as part of an overall larger process. So I don't know if there's a way we can do something to try to help get that position filled without having the spillover effect, like if there's a smaller amount of a requested raise that perhaps could be adjusted within, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
If you want my recommendation, it would be to go back to Tony's original request, which would be to hire that person in at the 2025 salary, knowing that that's their salary for 25 and the last 2 months of 2024.
And that would be the midpoint.
That would be my recommendation, and that was his original request before it kind of all started to snowball.
I can live with that, I think.
And that doesn't change anybody else.
No, because it would still be at midpoint, and it's not reclassifying, changing any of the requirements or any of that, and it would get it up to what, he originally asked for $36,200. So if we went ahead and just did the 2025 salary, that's $37,115. So I feel like that's kind of just go ahead and move it, but.
That sounds like what I was envisioning, some sort of a workable compromise there to try to help get that position filled. I'd entertain that as a motion if the rest of the council feels that way.
I did want to add one comment. So we are currently working in my office. If any employee in their job description says that they have an RN, an LPN degree, and like this, an associate's degree, we will be obtaining those in my office. So we've got that as a project listed to make sure we have all the certifications in line. So we'll be, looking to you to receive their, accreditations. So that is something we're working on.
Okay. Okay. I think for this particular situation, Chris and Tony, if you're watching, I think what we're envisioning is trying to do a salary adjustment to the extent that we feel like we can within our boundaries without making the job description change at the moment. And then we can look at that department-wide through the regular, we have a timeline in the ordinance, right, Cecily, that we can do. So this would.
It's not incorrect that you can reclassify during a vacancy.
No, right.
It's not. It's just the biggest thing was, I feel like, all of the surveys, how we classified, that was all filled out by the employees in the prosecutor's office and signed off by Tony. And the requirements from all of them said you do not need to have an associate's degree. So at this point, the only thing we would be changing
It's the one.
is the salary. And there's no other reason. No duties, no responsibilities, nothing. And for years, the prosecutor's office has been able to run without having that requirement. And if we open the door to change that requirement, then everybody that has an associate's degree can then say, I want to reclassify my position. So-
And we recognize, I mean, the people on this committee and the council recognize that this whole salary survey adjustment, trying to get everybody to the midpoint, has been a very daunting task, and it's also been really enlightening. You know, we recognize that some people in our county weren't being paid enough, but we also learned that a lot of people are being paid a lot more. And so we're trying to bridge that gap, and it's not the easiest thing to do. And we also recognize that some job descriptions are not as clear as they maybe should be. When people, we need to see the job descriptions and see them in more detail. And I think most department heads have realized that now, that that job description is much more important than they maybe originally thought.
Yeah, that's fair.
So would the motion be to to hire at the 25 budget plus the last couple months and then work on the 26 budget? Is that what we're talking about?
Well-
Committee would be,
Let's do this in two different motions. Let's talk about the one position that's vacant and the recommend, which is the office assistant, correct?
It's line in the 18.
Oh, 14?
No, 14. Oh, zero-
18,
18,
yes.
18, okay. So the motion would be to allow the change in that salary effective immediately to what is advertised as the 2025 salary. So it would be an increase in the current salary to hopefully entice that position to be filled.
And that's 37,116 is what,
Okay, which was what was already in our book.
okay.
So I guess technically we don't need a motion because it's already in the advertised.
Well, but you'll need to amend this 24 salary
Yeah,
ordinance.
yeah, because they're gonna start, they're gonna start
Okay,
making
so
it right
that's
away.
that's, you're right. Okay, I'm sorry. So that would be the motion to move the salary, the current salary, which is 34,980, to the 37,116, effective immediately for that position. So I have Joe with that motion, Jeff with the second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. That motion carries 6-0. Now, I think we need to have a motion on the recommendation of the committee for the overall budget request, which, Carol, could I trouble you to try to restate that again? Would it be?
I think basically all other requests in this department would stay at midpoint or 3%, basically. It's just really, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
It's that simple.
Okay, so can I take that as a motion?
That's a motion.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Mike, so any other questions, comments for Chris while we've got him before we vote? Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0.
I'm sorry, Alan, who were the two?
Carol and Mike. Carol made the motion, Mike with the second. Okay. Chris, thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Sommer appreciates the work you guys have done, especially for this request, so
Yeah.
thank you. Have a
Thank you
good
for
day.
pinch hitting. Okay. Chris is with us. Next up was Parkview. We just had one quick item in the Parkview budget that we needed to review.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Again, I'm going to look to either Harold or Mary to,
Okay, well, I can, basically, I have the same report. The classification committee met, reviewed this, and while we anticipate that this position, it was listed as the groundskeeper, and I actually got a copy of the job description, Chris, and it's listed as the groundskeeper, but then this person seems to be doing a lot of maintenance, so I understand.
Yeah, it's maintenance. at
So I
groundkeeper.
understand
I think
your-
it's just verbiage.
So I understand your, as I was reading the committee was reading the job description, we're going, well, it says electrical maintenance, plumbing, and so is there certifications that go with that into the job description show that, then it would have come up differently. So the committee's recommendation is to just leave it at the salary of midpoint and the longevity pay, which actually does substantially give this employee quite a raise this year. But we would entertain that you rework your job description.
Well, I will admit, I was taken aback. And again, this is just me, and Alan knows I'm an honest guy after 11 years. I thought this was a done deal, but I understand there were other meetings after. I pled my case for Kent 37 years. He's been at the county longer than he's been alive, more than half his
Exactly.
life has been spent with the county.
Exactly.
And I guess I would reiterate what Carol's saying is that we're not opposed to relooking at that, but we need to look at it probably for next year.
Yep.
Because we were making the decision based on what was submitted for this year, and we're trying to fall into the trap of what got us to the point that we had to have the survey now was these one-off exceptions that started to add up and accumulate, and so we're still just trying to be consistent in how we administer this survey.
And I understand. I'll tell you a little history. When I got there, the application that we used had the Spanish-American War on it. It was from 1946. So I got with Tommy, our county attorney. That place needed some new blood, and that's what I brought.
You've been good for it. You've been
So
very good for it.
Well, I appreciate it. We brought that up. But the next thing was the job descriptions. I had to look at scope of care. We're not licensed, obviously. We're self-care. We were darning socks, bathing people. We were doing things that put us in the liability scope and then beyond scope of care. So I redid all the job descriptions then when I came in 14.
Okay.
Something I noticed immediately was Kent Spalding was grossly underpaid at that point, 26 years. I won't call out a name and slander somebody or even give their initials, but I came to a council meeting and I had a councilman who's no longer with us. He's alive, but not here. He told me, hey, Chris, well, you do your due diligence. You get salary. I did on a smaller scale what you guys have done. He told me on my own to go around the county areas and get reasonable salaries for a maintenance groundskeeper. He said, rewrite the job description, which I had just rewritten. I did both. I spent hours. Only to come to a meeting and him say, well, it's not enough.
Oh, my.
But Kent was grossly underpaid in 2014. So here we fast forward, we just redid these again. I think it's 23 and you guys just approved them. But it's verbiage. It's under groundskeeper / maintenance. And he does all that obviously and has been. He started out in housekeeping. But again, I'm pushing for the guy, you guys know, I'm your guy. I was in
And
the military
don't-
33
I want to be
years.
clear to those, to Kent and to those watching, with the longevity that we've added, that he gets the maximum amount because of that long service.
And that was my next question,
We
was
are-
that max?
We are, yeah, he is at
Okay.
max.
He's at max.
He is at a 10% raise year over year, so that's,
Yes.
it is a meaningful increase to the compensation that I would consider to be a down payment on that review that we'll conduct. Starting right off the bat, that I would call him a maintenance / groundskeeper rather than groundskeeper / maintenance,
too.
to
Yeah.
reiterate the importance of the maintenance role.
And I agree with you, Alan. That's the way it was when I came. It's been that way 11
Yeah.
years.
I don't
It's,
think-
it's
I don't-
all semantics.
I don't think it will take much to get his job description the way it really should read. I think, we all know that he's doing all the work, but the way the job description reads now, it says he does electrical and plumbing. Does that mean that he plugs in and it doesn't work and he calls an electrician, or does that mean he plugs in, it doesn't work and he fixes it?
Yeah.
So we just need to understand that a
And
little
I'm
bit.
willing to do that. I mean, this will be the fourth one, but I don't
sorry.
mind. No. I do not mind. I just didn't want to get to the point, picks up screwdriver, holds handle, looks at tip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I agree with you. I did, when we were asked to revise them in 23, I did go into detail. I'm obviously not going to fluff it and make it look,
Right.
but there may be some things I missed.
Well, and this might be a situation where maybe he has some certifications and maybe he doesn't, but he also has longevity in doing these jobs. So it'd be helpful to, for us, for the classification committee, when you come back to us at the right time, that we see that.
The other thing that we did talk about, but at the last hearing, was this concept of super longevity for somebody like Kent that's been here well past what we capped out our longevity service at. But that seemed like a policy change that would have to go into place that was too quick to come for this budget cycle, where we were talking about days and maybe a few weeks, whereas we needed to have, amendments to ordinances and things like that. So I still think that's on the table as something that could be looked at coming for '26.
I understand. Go ahead, Bernie.
Yes, Commissioner, but Bert, would you step up so that the public can hear you?
I think one thing, first of all, you guys have done an excellent job. It's almost impossible to bring 200 and some employees together and meet in the middle and everybody be happy. The problem that I see is with this particular individual is he's been here 37 years. And that's a different problem than anybody else has, to be honest. And my guess is he's probably the senior employee of our county. Is there anybody more than 37 years?
Not that I can think of.
I think that I think there's only one other employee that's been here close to 30.
And so my point is because of their longevity and because of the employment record that they have, he's an exception. He's not the normal. And, say, well, we got to keep them all at the middle. It's to a certain degree impossible when you have somebody who's at the extent that he is in. So I am sure that knowing this individual, my suspicions are he's probably a little bit hurt because he's probably anticipating a little bit more. I've seen it with the state and the teachers. Next year they're going to get more money, and next year they're going to get more money. Well, his problem is his next years are running out. He's not going to be here another 10 years or 5 years probably. He's got 37, so for him to wait next year to get his salary increase a little bit better where it should be and should have been since 14, he's going to struggle with that. And it's my opinion that you guys have to make some exceptions, that everybody doesn't fit in the cookie jar. You've got to have some reasons to bring somebody up a little bit. And I think in this particular case, wording and classifications is kind of a disappointment because obviously it's on our end that we've made that mistake, not necessarily on his end. He's been a good employee for all that time. So I just wonder if we're not missing it a little bit in making an exception. And his advantage is, and his disadvantage is 37 years of service. So, and I know you've...
Thank you for those comments, and I certainly understand, and I have a great deal of empathy and agreement with a lot of them. But I go back to the whole purpose of the exercise was to come up with an objective, to try to take that subjective out of there about a feel-good situation or I don't know exactly what I want to say, but that this person deserves it because we wanted to make it about positions and not people. And so I'm not, as I just said to Chris, I'm not ruling out the idea that we come back and revisit this idea of do we want to reward super longevity for those that go beyond 25 years, say. I'm just throwing that out as a number, but I just don't think we can get that in place for this budget discussion yet. So, and I don't want to just randomly say that. I wanted to put it in place as a policy that then becomes an objective measure that we could implement.
And so my question to you is, Alan, when will that become effective?
Well, I mean, presumably for the 26 budget.
Yeah. And so if you're,
I understand what you're saying. I get it.
To wait 2 years to this individual is questionable in my opinion.
But I don't want to also state what we've already stated. This person is getting a nice raise for 2025. So I mean, we're consider it a down payment on further due diligence as we work through and make it about a review of the entire employee base, not a review of one person. That's
Right.
that's I guess how I want to handle it.
Yeah,
Anytime
but in
we
this
make an
particular case though,
exception- Anytime we make an exception, though, we open it up for 10 more people to come and stand where you're standing, Bert, and ask for another exception. It's just really difficult. It's very difficult.
so you don't make exceptions?
Right now, we're not trying to make exceptions. We're trying to,
We're trying to establish this baseline.
I understand
We're trying
that.
to establish this
Totally
baseline.
understand.
Yeah, yeah.
But in his particular case, 37 years,
Understand.
he's probably wanting to get to 40,
I understand.
You're going to give him when he walks out the door and say, well, here's your raise. So, I think we both understand.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments very much.
I'll just say a few more things, Alan, and we can wrap this up. Number one, you guys know, if I was a boss and wasn't standing here fighting for my people, I wouldn't be much of a boss.
That's right.
Number two, Kent Spalding, I told you, went 5 years without a pay, and he stayed. No increase, and he stayed. He's dedicated, 37 years, and I'm not selling the point. We've made a decision, I'm good. But I'm going to at least say what I got to say for the guy. It's not about being a good guy. It's about a guy that comes out there in the middle of the night, pushes snow, resets elevators and fire alarms, dedicated. Got it. Kent's happy. Don't get me wrong. This is not, to me, in my opinion, going to turn him against the county. Not happening. And the last thing I'll say, when people do come to me to interview for a job day one, the first thing I do is show them not just their salary. I show them all the benefits the county gives them. I show them the raises we've got in 8 years without paying an increase in health insurance. I said, this is what you're coming to. I don't care about your hourly rate. You need to look at the big picture. But the next thing I tell them is, your goal is to be here 10 years. Get vested. Otherwise, you've wasted your time. I had a person quit at 8. What a fool. I tell them all, get 10. And I've got, my median employment out there is 10 and a half years.
That's great.
I've pulled at least 3 or 4, counting myself, to that mark. That's what it's about. And then you go from there. But anyway, that's all I got to say.
Well, Chris, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your advocacy. I wouldn't expect any less.
No, I appreciate
totally
you
understand
listening.
where you're coming from.
Yes, sir.
And we're not done with this issue.
No, I appreciate
We're
it.
pausing for now.
Yes, sir.
And with that being said, I think because this would be a change in the budget book, I would need a motion to move that position to the salary midpoint versus the high point that it was advertised at.
That's correct. That's correct. I'll make that motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Carol. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff, that we move that, which I have in my book is 43,992.
993, Alan.
993.
993.
993, okay. Okay, thank you for,
So it's,
am I right about that?
yeah, 43,993.
Okay.
Plus the 3.
Plus the
And-
3,000.
And that does calculate.
The
to be a-
longevity.
To be, with the longevity, it calculates to be a 10% raise this year. And, I would, we would agree with you that he probably deserves the high point. But we are just trying to do the best we can.
I understand.
It's
Listen,
where-
you guys make
it's a tough
decisions,
spot.
I support them.
It's a tough spot. So tell him that we really appreciate his work, and I would
Absolutely.
love to come out and visit with him.
I told you, you're welcome out there anytime. I'll give you a $3 tour, anybody.
All right.
Let me finish the vote here. I've got a motion by Carol, a second by Jeff. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. Chris, thank you.
No, thank you, guys. Appreciate your work.
Thank you, Chris.
Next up was similar situation with the auditor's office. And I imagine that the recommendation will be,
same.
again, the same. Auditor's tab is 3. If you want to flip back to that real quick.
So many pieces of paper up here. Yeah, the recommendation is basically the same. There were 2 positions, 0015 and 0017, that had requested been for the high point, and we recommended to take them back to the midpoint, since that's what we're trying to stay at. We understand that these people, too, deserve maybe more money, especially this year with all of this stuff that's been happening. The payroll position has been dealing with all this survey stuff and all these requests by department heads and for special treatment and all these kind of things, but we're really trying to stay to this,
So do you have the correct numbers if we stayed at the
Broken record.
midpoint? I don't have those written in my book.
Yes, let's see, I think I do. What was the tab again?
3.
3, okay. Make sure I don't have the right ones written down here, same ones written down. Oh, okay. So I have, the 0015 is 39,598, says Leah.
That's 24.
That's 24 budget.
Okay, so then it's 43,894? Cecily, is that right?
I didn't write down the,
Shoot.
so I can run upstairs and look.
No,
I've got my survey here.
39,396, yeah, that's right. 43,894 is 0015,
Okay.
and 39,396.86 is 0017.
I'm sorry, say that the second one again. 39.
39,396,
Okay.
What was the first one? I'm sorry.
43,894.
894?
Okay. Any questions, comments from either the council or from Britt? Nothing? Okay. All right, I need a motion. Motion by Mary. Second by Joe, with raised hands, okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion being to move that to the midpoint. I should have said that, it reiterated
That's
that
okay.
before we
That's
voted,
okay.
but yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
And our next person is not here yet.
Yeah, and so I knew we would probably go through these pretty quick, so we've got a few minutes before Renee is scheduled to be here.
I wasn't even sure if Renee was coming.
I believe she is.
Dispatch. I sound like a broken record.
But it's new to each one of the ones that hear it, so.
Exactly. Excuse me. Let me get more coffee. while I
Janet,
do
do you have Renee's number handy that you could go ahead and tell her that we're ready? She wants to pop on over.
That's our discretion, you know what I mean?
And then you're gonna have 10 people wanting to go.
Well, let's take a brief recess until we have our next person in.
You gotta have a minimum, we have to have a minimum of 35 years or whatever it is. I don't know, I'm looking at it from the teachers, who's on the school.
And so I'll have Carol, as the committee representative, again, kind of review the recommendation of the committee.
I don't even have a document about that one, so I'll wing it.
Okay.
So basically, the committee discussed all the jobs all across the county, and, we were just going a little bit with the survey, And we went back and forth, and there were some days, Renee, when the more we talked, the more confused we got. But then we brought ourselves back together and said, what are we really trying to do? And we're trying to bring everybody to the wage, the midpoint. That's what we said we're gonna do when we first started the survey. And we realized in doing this survey that means that some people are still not making as much as they maybe should, but there's some people who are making more than they probably should. But we're trying to do this the best we can. And so our bottom line recommendation as the committee was that every position go to midpoint, and if that midpoint does not take them to 3%, we take them to 3%. That's the bottom line, and we've been holding that across the county. So that includes your position.
And I
So
want,
I want to make,
let me say this for you.
because
Let me
I did
say
not
this
ask for
Let me
this.
say this for you, okay? Yeah, in this instance, I want to speak up for Renee. Renee did not ask to be put to the midpoint. This was a direction from me as the president to Cecily and Britt after having reviewed the discrepancy between sheriff, EMS director, and central dispatch director, and it was an honest attempt to try to narrow the gap in between our three public safety directors. Again, the exception thing, Bert, that we're talking about. And as Carol indicated, that made sense when looked at just as a group of three. And then when you started looking at it as the whole budget and the whole employee base and everything, we decided we had to pull back and hold the line and treat everybody the same as we tried to reestablish this baseline. So I did go over and speak with Renee the other day to try to go through that whole context because, as she stated, this was not something she asked for. So Renee's in an awkward position here, and I apologize for putting you in that awkward position.
Right, because it looks like
I know.
I asked for so much
We know,
more for
we
me,
know.
and I wouldn't do that
We know
above
that.
my
We know that.
employees, so.
It's his fault.
It's just, it is awkward, it's
Yeah.
very awkward, and I don't want you all to think that I'm,
No,
Yeah.
we don't.
So that's why I wanted to be very, very clear that this is not on Renee. This is on me. This is on an attempt to try to do the right thing that resulted in one of these exceptions that we're trying to now avoid.
Yes, exactly.
So, we'll reset, and Renee and I talked about it the other day, and that's the.
I am a department head that shows up
Yeah.
every day,
You are.
and I do my job.
And you do it well, and we appreciate you, and we know that you probably deserve more than than the raise you're getting. We're just trying, this is a
No,
tough spot.
I understand,
This
I
is a
just,
tough spot.
it does make me put in an awkward position.
We're sorry.
Because
We're sorry.
I didn't ask for that,
We're sorry.
and now I'm up here like as if I'm lumped into everybody where I'm asking for something that I don't deserve or whatever, so.
We're sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I apologize for that. It was well intentioned on my part
No,
to try
I know.
to make that
I
request.
know,
and
it
so
just
I want it
puts
to
me
be
in a
ve-
very awkward position.
Well, let's
you know.
hope that it's not as awkward because I want to make very clear to the public and those, watching in the room and online what the situation really was. So my apologies to you for putting you in that awkward position, and that is literally the only change that was recommended to your budget was to adjust that salary back to the midpoint, and
Yep.
I just want to say I was 100% for.
No, you're
I-
fine,
you know,
you're fine,
it
no,
was-
it's fine,
it was
it's fine.
extremely
It
tough.
just is very awkward.
Yeah, we were all 100% for it.
Yes,
until-
no, I-
Until we realized the ramifications of
Sure.
exceptions.
Yeah.
No,
how
I
it
understand.
cascaded through everything else. So again, well, Renee, anything else you want to say?
I just want to clarify for one other thing.
Okay.
On the longevity.
Okay.
Because, to make sure, and I will ask this for me, to make sure that I am at the 3,000.
Yes.
Because my time on, Sabine Grice and I, when we merged from the city to the county, we were told, that
Time.
our time on would be, and that would put me at the 3,000.
And that's my intent. I think that was the intent.
So I just wanted to make sure that
That's
that
what-
was.
Yeah.
Yes.
We haven't really finalized any of the
Yes.
longevity numbers. We kind of pushed that off because that could be
Right. So that is my only thing for me that, everybody else I think was.
Yeah, and then that
was
goes
good on
back to
there.
that agreement we made at the time
Yes.
that dispatch was created, that we were going to take on that time of service, and I
Yep.
think that certainly flows through to this discussion too, so
Yep.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, we all agree.
All right. Thank you.
So because we are changing a number in the budget, I want to have a motion that would move the director's salary from the high point to the midpoint. And do you happen to have that number, Carol?
Oh, I don't know, midpoint. Midpoint is 72,714.
Okay. So do I have that motion? Make a motion. Okay, I have Jeff with a motion, second by Mike All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. Okay, thank
Thanks,
you, Renee.
Thanks, Renee.
Thanks, Renee.
Okay, we're a little ahead of schedule, but Rodney is with us here, so we'll just keep on trucking
Did you say it's 72?
and move on to the Board of Health.
Okay, let's see, this wasn't,
I'm not sure this was actually something referred to the committee, but it was a topic that we brought up at the hearing, and Carol and I have discussed offline again since then. And Rodney, we wanted to go back and revisit the issue of the assistant medical director. And go back to the discussion we had a year ago when you had met with a committee that consisted of Carol and Todd and I, as we kind of worked our way through the new state money and getting that new budget. And all of our recollection at that time was that the assistant director was going to be a transitory position that was there to overlap for a period of time, not unlike we do for other positions, to help train the new person and then be phased back out. So I guess it's the feeling that my feeling, and I'll see how the rest of the council feels, is that doesn't need to be in the 2025 budget any longer. And so that's maybe the topic I'd like to bring up for discussion. I think Carol feels that way. I'm going to open it up to what other council members feel. I'm not sure if the purpose of that role is to be advisory in nature. It does feel like we have medical directors in surrounding counties, other people other resources that we could draw on that would not require us to have that expenditure. So that's the topic I wanted to bring up today with regard to the health budget. Carol, anything you care to add to
no, I would
that?
just like to say as well, right, I think has Dr. Pearson been in her position for a year or 2 years, coming January? 1 year.
We're not quite a year yet.
1 year. So it's January 3rd, I think, when she started in 2023. So it'll be a year. And we fully understand that, why you were asking for.
She started in 23 or 24?
23.
23.
She started in 23.
Right, so we have
So-
been in over a year
Yes,
then.
yes, yes. So
Okay.
it'll be 2 years in January.
Okay.
So, and we fully understand why you wanted Dr. Tharp to help. We had just come out of COVID and things were still, we really needed that advice from a seasoned health officer. So we really appreciate that. But now I'm wondering if we can let Dr. Pearson do this by herself. My question to you would be, are you comfortable? Are you comfortable with our current health officer? Do you feel like,
What my fear is, Rodney, is that we're not paying for an assistant medical director. We have someone on retainer to be there as a fallback, or that's, are we really getting anything for that investment? That's ultimately, I guess, my question. So with that, you've heard,
Yes.
and does anybody else want to say anything before I turn it over to Rodney? Okay, Rodney.
Well, again, I don't, question your questioning of it, but it's really not my decision. But if you tell me to take it out of the budget, then I have to take it out of the budget. I think the direction from the board and from the original health officer about this transition was their feeling that, somebody has to be here. There's so many things that might come up that a physician per se has never dealt with. But if you ask for it to be taken out of the budget, then my direction is to then go and take it out of the budget and go back to the board and explain to them. Again, I think that's a discussion that should be had between you and the board and the health officers, because I take my direction from them. So that was their decision originally, not mine. So,
Okay.
but I follow your direction, and if you say you want it out of the budget, then
Can you give me some additional context on whether, based on your knowledge of how the department operates,
Sure.
is that a, I don't know how quite to word it, is it a contingent position that's there, to be utilized when needed, or are there active ongoing duties for that position that is utilized currently?
well, I know currently over the course that we've had it, that there's been times where meetings were held that the current health officer couldn't be at, but the assistant came in and were in. So I know there's been several instances where things have come up, medically mostly, that have required, her to reach back and ask, historically or experience-wise, what is it that is our best course of action for one of these particular instances. So how often that occurs is, something I cannot predict. I see still, and I hear people telling me, COVID's still around and COVID's coming back. And, I know as a public health official in my 20 years, we're just short of the next public health emergency that might come up. So, but again, I take my direction initially from you folks as far as budgets, but as far as the justification of that position, I would say that the board and the health officers are much more qualified to iterate to you why they wanted that position to be, maintained, so.
Rodney, am I correct that, that this part-time position was a new position when Dr. Tharp retired?
Yes.
There was we hadn't had a part-time person prior to
Correct.
that, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Any other council members have thoughts?
Well, it's different than any other position or board, job classification. If the Board of Health board voted for this, who am I to vote against the Board of Health board? That's my thought. Not saying anything that has been discussed here, the work that's been done, just saying, am I qualified? Yeah, that's all.
I understand.
COVID is still around, it's,
Well,
yeah. Now, the history that everybody has in that department, this was a first for them, I'm sure, this pandemic. don't know,
I guess
but,
maybe I'm a little bit biased or have maybe a different outlook, only because we went through those committee meetings last year where we talked about it very specifically as being a transitional position, and now we're talking about making it an ongoing full-time position, and I felt like it was worth having the conversation. Rodney's point about, maybe it being a more direct conversation between the Board of Health and the council is a good point. It makes a lot of sense. My fear is if we approve it with this in here, that conversation won't happen. If we pull it out, I'm pretty sure it will.
yeah,
I agree with that.
So,
I mean,
Yeah.
I've had probably 5 health departments around the state reach out to us to get our job description because they were adding the same thing to the department.
adding an assistant? Okay.
We want our county to have the best health coverage as possible.
Sure.
And that's,
Again.
I'm not saying that. When I'm looking at the budget, I'm just looking for, this started out to be a temporary spot, now it's here 2 years later, so we should talk about it.
yes.
And I agree with Alan, you pull it out and we'll have that discussion. And
It's not an issue of, can you afford it? You can
Sure.
afford it.
No, it's
That's
not,
not the
yeah.
issue. The issue is, do we need it?
Certainly.
And
My thoughts are is if we haven't had it before, we done this as a kind of a training session for the new health officers, so we should, if they want an assistant, the board needs to either go through Rodney or approach us in the proper way that we have everybody else for a new employee.
I feel a lot, very similar to Jeff in that who am I to overrule the Board of Health? But I would like to have that discussion. And so,
Yeah, just to understand.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the chair's not supposed to make a motion, but if I were making a motion, yes.
Alan, could I?
Yes, please.
I think a couple of things that we need to think about. Number one is Dr. Tharp has moved away from this area and is no longer even a Clinton County resident, which makes it a problem when, he's actually in Noblesville, number one. Number two, all of our department heads have had somebody to maybe train or become involved with the system and so forth. And here we have a professional doctor who has been on the job now for 2 years, and we're still having somebody else that we're carrying as an assistant. And yeah, we could all have some kind of a disaster that comes up again that's unforeseen. But, we can't look in a crystal ball. If that's the case, we're going to have a lot of snow this year. We need to get an assistant highway department man, and we're going to really be in trouble because our EMS department over here needs an assistant because he's swamped and so forth. My point is we have a qualified physician who is now in the system and has been for 2 years to carry on a salary of $30,000. It seems a little bit rough when just before we were pulling back $5,000 because of somebody that wasn't capable of proving that they were needed as much. So, I think I just think it's a little bit awkward to have somebody that has been on the job part-time for 2 years at a pretty good salary, and we're still paying him as a full-time, not
Well,
as a,
it's a part-time, it's at
Yes.
13,258 is the part-time, yeah.
so.
Request, is the
Okay.
request. So, yeah. You
Now-
care to make a motion?
Um,
Or anybody care? I shouldn't put it on you.
It's okay. I would make a motion that we remove the funding for the part-time health officer at this time.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Carol, a second by Mike, that we remove that. That would be zeroing out 010012 in the health 1159 budget. Any last-minute comments or questions?
I would just like to say, with especially the consideration that if the Board of Health would like to meet with us, we would be happy to have a discussion and add that back in
If warranted, yeah.
if warranted.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, good
I agree.
comment.
I agree.
Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries
I'm gonna vote against.
5-1. Jeff voting no. Okay. Rodney, thank you. I don't believe there was anything else unless, did you have something?
There is one other thing.
Yeah, we did
Okay,
have
I'm
it.
sorry.
The committee had discussed. Per the survey, the food inspector and what's the other inspector? Do you have a food environmental. They came back over the midpoint. So the committee had discussed that when you fill that vacant position, you were talking about taking that salary to the midpoint versus what it's currently at. And whether or not it was gonna go back to 32 hours or stay at the 37 and a half, 35.
Yeah, it was the position is empty.
Okay?
And so this is one of the things that I feel like the council needs to decide across the board again. When positions become open and the current pay is above the midpoint, do we start those new people out at the midpoint? Or do we continue where that position was, even if it's way over the midpoint? You know what I'm saying? So this vacancy is an opportunity to make that decision, that it's vacant, so if we fill it, I feel like we should fill it, and the committee felt it, we should refill it at the midpoint instead of the higher rate. But I think we're dealing with this one, the committee wanted to deal with this one, but I think it's bigger than that. It's whatever
It's setting a
decision,
precedent.
whatever decision we make needs to be shared with all department heads. Because that's the only way we're going to get this control of
Yeah.
way higher coming back to,
Well, so
the
my,
middle.
to go back to the midpoint would be consistent with my thinking in the sense that the reason that we did not take anybody lower was because it was unfair to the incumbent to
Exactly.
be punished.
Yeah, exactly.
If there is no incumbent to be punished, you set it to where the salary should be, in my opinion. I'd forgotten about that issue. Does anybody else care to weigh in on that topic? We're certainly not under an obligation to vote yes on everything the committee recommends, so if the majority of the council think otherwise, we can go a different direction, but.
Well, I think for this, just for, is it just this one we're talking about, or just all new hires, kind of? for
At the moment,
for-
I think we're just talking about this. We're not talking
Okay.
about a policy change, but
Okay.
what we are doing is setting a precedent that would be difficult, I think, to go a different direction with.
Well, just in general, I'd like the low end for somebody that's coming in and maybe stair step them. Everything that we do pretty much in our small little business is when we hire somebody, especially somebody that we really want, and their salary is here, and we're talking to somebody right now, and it's like, we can stair step you. We'll get you there. 3 months, give me 3 months. If you want that salary right now, man, the pressure's on you. But if you can give me 30, 60, 90 days or whatever that is, just to get you where you want to be so I can get you from where you were to where you are now.
Yeah.
But how you putting that into?
And the committee
but-
did talk about that as well,
Yeah.
as starting out at the midpoint, taking them all the way to the empty positions, all the way to the low point, with the midpoint promised at the end of a year. But
Very good.
Those are just discussions. Those
Yeah.
are just discussions,
But
not a
to me, those would
recommendation.
be policy documents that would come before us either as an amendment to the salary, the job classification and compensation ordinance, or even as a standalone document, but it would be a policy decision that we would make that doesn't exist today. So, you know,
I think-
we are looking at this one a little bit as an example. A
Rodney's here,
one-off.
Rodney's here, and he needs to know what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
My only concern is if you have that view where everybody comes in at the low point, are we going to have trouble attracting qualified candidates?
We may have trouble hiring, but we also are perpetuating the big difference.
So.
Well, the understanding wouldn't be that they're on the low point, Mary, indefinitely. It would be
For a short time.
viewed as a, for lack of a better term, a probationary period.
Okay.
Before they would elevate up.
So,
But-
I just want to clarify, that position is at 37 and a half hours. That's why that salary is where it is.
The hourly rate still came back.
I understand,
Yeah.
but that is a 37 and a half hour. And I have no problem taking it back to 35 if you wish. That's not an issue either.
Well, I was looking at it exactly the opposite. I have no objection to you keeping it at 37.5, but we adjust the hourly rate to the midpoint, like we're doing for everybody else.
And like I say, I can do whatever it is you desire. I think the position's been advertised in a range
Okay?
as well, because I'm in the same agreeance with you folks that, you know, folks have to come in, go through a probationary period and prove themselves, so.
So effectively, what we would be doing is limiting the range of Rodney's discretion to the midpoint as the top end for now versus the high point being, well, it's not even really the high point, it would just be the previous salary
Exactly.
would be the high end of that range. So I need to have somebody throw out a motion of some
You're
kind.
talking about just starting at the midpoint.
So that the advertised
and then
salary
going
would
up
be at
to
the
whatever
midpoint.
Salary is.
Yeah.
It's like a probation period.
Well, Rodney would have the discretion to have that be below the midpoint, but what the council would be authorizing would be no more than the
No more
midpoint.
than the midpoint.
No,
Nobody can.
Not automatically assuming the previous incumbent salary.
Right.
We're going back to what the salary survey
'Cause
said
it's-
for that position, resetting it because the position's
Because it's
open.
over the midpoint now.
I'd make that motion,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
However, it was just stated.
Yeah, so that the open position would be advertised at the midpoint salary for that position per the survey. And Rodney would have the discussion or the discretion, I'm sorry, to go below that if you wanted to hire someone in with less experience below that level.
I'll second that.
Okay, so motion by Jeff, a second by Mike. I want to make sure we're all clear on that. That one got
Yes.
kind of muddy there. Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries. Is your hand up?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
it
6-0.
Cecily, do you have a question?
Well, that seems like we're doing the ranges,
No, well,
That's not what
and
we
that
meant.
was,
That's not what we
no, I'm not
meant.
saying doing the vote was to go to advertise the salary at the midpoint.
Right.
right, but if you're giving him discretion to go lower,
Doesn't any office holder have that discretion to go lower?
that's what Lori was saying when we discussed it with her, Carol, was that if you're adopting
Midpoint.
midpoint for everybody and you leave it to the discretion of one
Everybody.
department, then you get back into they're setting the salary, like, we needed to be consistent and say midpoint,
Well, then,
low point.
then we're doing midpoint. Until such time that we review that policy and have a policy in place.
That's what her
Okay.
recommendation was, that until we put some kind of range.
A big
Whether
thing in
it's
place.
performance-based or it's skill level-based, that we stick with midpoint.
Okay,
So
so maybe we need to clarify that.
let's
I'm sorry.
read the motion again,
So-
so we all know what it said.
So the motion would be to the empty position for, I believe that's the food inspector position, would be set at the midpoint for the salary survey, period. Because it's empty and it allows us an opportunity to reset.
That's my motion.
Okay, so is everybody clear on that? I don't know if we need to go through revoting. I think we're all clear on what we're,
Okay.
okay. All right, is everybody clear on that end of the table on what we did? Okay. And is that all we had for Rodney before okay. Rodney, anything you have for us before?
I believe there was a question of the discrepancy between LPNs in the county.
Well, we did talk about that, was another conversation about the LPNs. I think you answered some of those questions for me when I talked to you on the phone. I just want to clarify again, the hours. So the lead nurse is based, I'm sorry,
TB.
crazy. She is an MA2, and she's
Correct.
working on her LPN. And according to our surveys, the MA2 and the LPN would be in the same range, so we're good there, whether she's,
We have two LPNs that are.
and then you
being
have the
paid
TB LPN and the immunization LPN, right?
We have two licensed LPNs that are being paid differently. And we
Okay.
have another one in the county that's being paid much more than they are.
Right. So let me clarify that your immunization LPN is 35 hours,
That's correct.
and then the other two are 32 hours or 35 hours?
32, we asked for the TB nurse to be moved to 35 now that she's fully trained, but Jordan asked that I simply wait till 2025 to approach that.
Okay.
He did approve putting money aside when her duties call to work more than 32 because she's hourly.
Right.
We had the money to cover it when she was
Right.
in higher demand, so, which we agreed to that.
So basically, council members, to catch you up, we have basically 3 LPNs. One is almost an RN at Parkview. And she works 32 hours. And then we have 3 at the health department.
Two. Two.
2, and one is working towards her LPN.
We have an MA, we have two LPNs that are licensed, registered with over
Exactly.
20-some years' experience each.
So we have a range of hourly pay, but part of that is due to they work different hours.
Yes.
So we have a range of 28, let's see, 30.95 an hour, 29.45 an hour, 35.25 an hour. So now I don't know that those, just because you're you're an LPN, is your job different? Your job descriptions are
Yeah.
different. There's different in the work. So the Parkview nurse is responsible for all those people during her 32 hours, but I think she gets called in. I think Chris explained to us that she gets called in and she's responsible for all those times. But Rodney also tells me that his LPNs work in the evening after hours and things like that too. The TB nurse specifically has to go and see people whenever she can get them. So we were just trying to look, and I mean, the people in my discussions, Cecily and, Mary and I, and we couldn't come up with a solution to this problem, but it's just something that is out there in conversation, and I don't know.
So
what to
is
do
there
about it.
is there a meaningful difference in the job descriptions of those 3 nurses?
The reason that the Parkview nurse came back, or is going to be at a higher level, is because she's exempt. And the FLSA has increased the threshold for exempt employees. So it affected her salary for 2025. If she were to, we would have had to reclassify her and make her a non-exempt position. But as soon as she gets her RN in May, we would have to take her back, because an RN automatically will come back exempt, just like Dana has been exempt all this time. But Dana is already over the salary threshold, so it didn't affect her going into 25. So that's the reason that there's the big difference between the LPN at Parkview and the LPN at the health department. If you look at the 24 salaries, she does not make more than your LPNs that you have currently. It's just gonna be moving forward. because of that salary threshold.
I see.
And it's really something that we couldn't change other than to, like I said, change her classification, but then we'd have to turn around and change it again in May. So that's why hers is higher. Your two LPNs, the one that got hired last year just got hired in at a higher rate than your immunization. So that's why those two are different.
And they work different hours.
But they're hourly. So their hourly number, I think they're
Right.
$1.50 off an hour.
Right. No,
So,
30.95 to 29.45.
so the survey said that we should do the 29.45, but because the TB and
Lead.
the lead
They had already been hired.
The lead individual's not an LPN.
do what?
The lead individual's not an LPN.
You know,
No, but
Right.
There's guys
those two positions were hired in this year at 50,000, which was more, a higher hourly rate than what your current, other LPN that you had.
That's correct. We were trying to get RNs, but we could not get RNs at that
So,
rate.
but that's what I'm saying, that's why there's
Yeah.
the discrepancy in the two pays for the LPNs, is because the one hired in higher. So this year with the survey, if you were already over midpoint, then you just got the 3%. So that's why that LPN is higher. Making sense?
Ronnie, do you have a request or a recommendation for us on this topic? Or is this something we just need to let go as it is for right now?
Well, I didn't realize we pay people according to what they might accomplish in the future, but I just felt like a salary survey for a licensed LPN should be across the board the same. I don't know how many clients she has out there, 30 maybe, and our two LPNs take care of the whole count. So as
Well,
far as,
it's not accomplished, it's how they're classified,
Right.
how the
Because of
Fair
her
Labor
duties
Standards
and
Act.
her job description, it made her, I mean, she's just like Dana's the supervisor there. She's basically the nurse, like, she's the only one in
Yeah,
that
that's-
department. So when they do the classification, she got extra points or
points,
whatever, and it made her be exempt. So it's not really a matter of, we're only paying her more because of the exempt status and the FLSA.
I understand that part. I completely
That's,
understand
but
that.
if you look
But
at
that's-
24, what is she making in 24? Parkview nurse, she makes, if I'm correct, she makes a lot less and has made a lot less than your LPNs for the last 10 years or whatever she's worked there. Yeah, she's currently at 43,778. And if you do the math, that's less than what I mean, you hired your LPN in at 50,000.
Yes.
So I mean, I guess you're looking at it as that we're not paying them the same, but the duties are different.
I'm looking at licensure. Unless my LPN's doing paperwork up front, issuing death and birth certificates, I'm looking at their professional licensure. That's correct.
But I'm saying that because of her being an exempt
I understand that.
employee, it automatically puts her there. And that, to say that you're looking at license, for the last 10 years, she's been being underpaid compared to your
I
LPN.
understand that too.
So,
So let's look back to what was turned in for the salary survey this year. So the salary survey, these people, the midpoint came from the salary survey, right? And so we're adjusting them just like everyone else, midpoint or 3%, even though we realize that doesn't make them all even, but nothing else in the county's even either. We just said midpoint or 3%. So we realized there was a discrepancy.
Yeah, it goes back to that, how do you make an exception in one area without all of a sudden having a whole budget full of exceptions?
So when you were hiring the other one, you said at 50,000, you were looking for an RN?
We were hoping to get RNs, but that salary
Did it
range will,
specify in your hire, or application, I guess, that was for an RN, or it was just for a nurse?
It was
So
preferred.
there's no action to be taken here.
But again, it's a market demand situation. And
Right.
50,000 wasn't gonna touch an RN. We didn't have hardly any RNs
Some
apply.
licensure, it has to
So,
be job description.
The lady that's currently an
But you're gonna
LPN
get-
that took that position has 27 years' experience.
In the prosecutor's office.
She had the right skill sets that we
Yeah.
needed in order to, and she had dealt with some
Yeah.
public already by being at the jail at one
Right.
point. So I'm just looking for at least parity within my own department for two LPNs that are both licensed the same, both have full-time jobs, and I don't.
So
have-
to get true parity, the high one needs to come down. And we've said we weren't gonna take anybody down.
Right, because
So that's-
well, your survey said that my immunization nurse needed to come up.
Which
But they were
presumably it went to the
underpaid.
midpoint, correct?
Right.
Yes.
The immunization nurse has just been, I mean, this is just my opinion, but we shouldn't have hired anybody new and higher than what the previous nurse was. I mean, that's just my opinion. That's how we got here.
Exactly.
We are,
It's the remnants of,
it's the
So
remnant,
a
it's the
matter
remnants of.
It's not fair to take her down, but it's also not
Sure.
fair to leave him under. So I don't know what the solution is.
Well, the,
An HR department.
That would be nice.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes.
I think it just has to do with the specifics of the job description, because, you know, this is gonna sound silly, but, you know, there could be an LPN working in the auditor's office, and just because she's an LPN doesn't mean we need to make sure she matches the rest of the LPNs, because her job description doesn't require her to do nursing. These are all nurses, so I understand they're all doing similar things, but, when their job descriptions were turned in for the salary survey, this is how they came out. And the problem lies because the last two, the lead and the TB, were hired in at a higher rate than the immunization. So it's gonna take a while for that to fix itself. Am I right?
yeah.
I mean, it's just gonna take a while. And then when you mix in there the difference in the hours, Ronnie, I don't know how you keep track of who's working so many different hours, because you had,
Yeah.
the other person you were talking about works 37 and a half hours, and then we have 32 hours, and then we have 35 hours, and I don't know how you keep track of who's working how many hours. It's
Part of my job.
part of your job, right?
So in essence, I don't think there's a clear recommendation or a clear path forward that's different than what's advertised.
I don't think, I mean,
Unless I'm missing it, Cecily.
No, I mean, I would like to say just move him up, but I also don't know that that's what Lori would.
It's another exception.
Yeah, I think she would look at it as that it's another exception. But,
Okay.
I guess that next year, when you start looking at things, we're gonna need to maybe do a scale instead of it being a straight 3% or whatever, do a scale so that we can start closing the gap.
I 100% agree.
That, you know, do like if you're considered to be overpaid from $1 to 5,000, you get this
Yes.
percentage. And if you're over, you know, so that way we can start closing it is the only way I can think of it. But
Right.
sitting here, if I were the immunization nurse, I'd want you to bring me up.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's the TB nurse that's the lower one. The immunization nurse is higher now.
No.
he works more hours.
Oh, he will be.
Well,
He
They're
will-
hourly, I mean, we talk about salaries.
He will
because
be
you guys
higher.
are looking
He
at
will be
your
higher.
yearly number, but hourly, he's making $1.50 less an hour than
Because it-
employees that just hired in less than 12 months ago.
Correct.
And he's been here for 3 years, 2
going on.
His overall pay is higher because he works more hours.
Right.
But his hourly pay is less.
So that's what I'm saying, is that I would like to see take him up to the hourly amount that the other two are making, so that it's.
Yeah, we
So
should.
that actually happened to him when you hired the other guys, right?
Bob Schaefer.
I mean, that actually happened to the immunization nurse when you hired the rest, because you hired them in at a higher pay. So,
But
yeah, I don't know if there's anything that we need to do about it. I don't think what's in our budget
and you
book
didn't
is
ask for,
right.
you didn't ask. for
No, we were just discussing,
I'm being asked by my staff.
now.
I'm
So-
not asking for myself. I know you've
Well,
already.
even in your budget, you didn't ask for.
No,
that.
I
You
went,
stuck with the
I went
numbers.
by exactly what
What we
you told
told.
me to use.
But it was just, this was a discussion with the committee because it was noticed.
And
that
obviously,
they
it's
had
it's
different
obviously it's a
hours now.
discussion with his people, yeah, so.
And so like I say, I have Eric, I don't know what your hourly figure is, but I remember the salaries at 53,000 and the one out at Parkview's making 58.
Well, she's not now, but she will January 1st.
Right, that, I'm talking in
He'll be making
2025.
53 in
And
January.
I'm looking
and
at the other
ones will make
LPN who
5.
is working closer hours to what the one at Parkview is, and she's making $8,000 less.
But again, that goes back to, I mean, that's something we
Can't move everybody up to the
The only way around that
wanna
would
take
be
money
to
away from
change
somebody.
her to a non-exempt position. You know, she's worked all these years as exempt, not eligible for overtime or comp time or any of that. So to change her to non-exempt now, just because you don't want to pay what the FLSA says the threshold is, to me, that would be a slap in the face to the employee. Like, we have not given her an extra dime for any time that she has worked over. And now, just because we don't want to do what the FLSA says, we're gonna change it. So, I mean, her salary, originally, she came back on the survey that she would be the same exact salary as what Eric says, the 29.45. But because of the status exempt, that automatically threw her into us having to increase for the threshold. So I guess if you know, if your LPNs qualified to be exempt positions, they would go up to the 58, but they would not get paid anything extra if they're working 40 or 45. It would be the same thing that Dana's in.
Understood.
So I get it, that it looks like she's making so much more and doing, you know, but it's, I mean, it's just kind of how it fell with, I mean, we can't control what the FLSA does.
Okay. So I don't think there's any action to be taken on those, that it would move forward as advertised. Okay. Anything else for Rodney? Rodney, anything else for us? Okay. All right, thank you, sir. You need a break? Okay, now we're gonna have a quick recess here. We've got, what, 7 minutes prior to our next advertised and last advertised budget, which is the sheriff's department. You still have your copy of the, of that document?
Not here. At home I have it.
Well, do you think we need it? Like I should have that printed? Is it possible to get, I have mine, but Carol doesn't have hers. Can we print it?
I bet,
Or
I
was that
think,
in there?
it's not in there, but I think she put the explanations in there.
It was the same as when I left, Joe.
I don't remember seeing that.
It's at the end of the packet that I gave.
we had several items when we concluded our last hearing that we had some discrepancies between what the salary midpoints would call for per the survey and what the requests were. So those got sent over to the Job Classification and Compensation Committee. Just to kind of reset for those who've entered the room that weren't here before, that committee is Carol Price, Mary King, and Todd Corey. Todd is down today for a medical issue, and so we have Carol's kind of been the spokesperson for the committee today, so I'll look at you again and have you lead us through the recommendations for the sheriff's budget.
All right, good. Well, I'm proud of the work that the committee has done and the council has done as well. This is a brand-new situation for us this year, this this survey that we've done. You know, we knew there were some discrepancies. We knew there were some people who needed to make more money. We knew there were some people who probably were making more than they maybe should have. Not that they don't deserve it, because the work is hard. We understand the work is hard, and we want the people in Clinton County to have the best service that they can. But we were also trying to figure out, rather than just continuing this, give everybody a 3% raise, and then we still have people making less than they should and people making more. So we decided we're going to do this survey. We did the survey. It's really opened our eyes. It hasn't been easy. It's made all of our jobs a lot harder. And yet, at the same time, it's made it a little bit easier, because we decided we were going to give everybody to the midpoint. If they're not at the midpoint on the survey, they would go to the midpoint. If that midpoint did not give them a 3% raise, they would get the 3% raise. So no one got less than a 3% raise. And that is basically the recommendation from the committee for the sheriff's budget. There are lots of specific jobs here, but in the end,
And you have that in your packet.
in the end, the bottom line is our recommendation to the whole council, who will make the final decision, is that everybody goes to the midpoint or receives 3%, no exceptions.
So Cecily, you had provided us this document that I just referenced that had maybe some more explanation and detail with regard to those positions. Any of those that you want to specifically point out or talk about?
I sent them to Ashley and Rich yesterday. They kind of have an explanation, a short, brief explanation as to why and how they came up with the 3% or why there were some changes. One of the biggest things, I think, was the courthouse security and the COs and the civil process have in 24, you guys made it to where they all made the same. Doing the survey, they not only came back classified in different categories, but they're also not working the same number of hours. And since they're hourly positions, you multiply the hours they work by the number of hours for the year. So I think that's where the biggest difference for most of them were. The admin, those changes were, or those, it just basically fell with, that's how they came back classified. So I guess, do you have any specific one? I mean, I don't know, are you disagreeing with all of them? Like, you tell me what.
Of course, I would disagree with all of them, and I'm also missing maintenance. We discussed maintenance in the last budget hearing, that there was quite a discrepancy between the supervisor and the maintenance. It was 13,000, if I recall correctly.
I didn't have that one on my thing to review. I thought that it was checked off that it came back okay.
Which budget is that?
So maintenance is in 380 in county general, and then the maintenance supervisor is in 1233 correctional lit.
So I do know that supervisors are gonna come back at a higher, they're gonna come back in a different category. But without, I mean, I'd have to specifically look at that one to see. I'm guessing that maybe the maintenance position, it probably came back the same as, the one we just discussed with Parkview, is my guess, but that's just guessing. But I thought we agreed.
Quite a different building.
So, which one did you ask for a different number on? Because these match.
This one. Maintenance, they asked for 50.
So are you looking at?
I
the
didn't put a
380?
number specifically. I brought it up for discussion because of the amount between the two salaries.
I'm just looking at them. I'm gonna say that the reason is just the supervisory duties. And that, what would be your request?
Again, that was just something open for discussion. I didn't make a request.
Okay.
I mean, I can look at it to see why there's a difference, but going off the survey, I mean, what we put in would be the 3% or the midpoint. I can make a note.
I will say that the jobs were classified based on the job descriptions that you turned in. And so we have had some people come to us and are concerned about the job descriptions maybe weren't as reflective of what's really happening as they could be. And we recognize that it's all a learning process on your part and our part. So we have recognized that. But at the same time, we came back to, we have to be consistent. So, trying to be consistent.
Sheriff, what thoughts, questions do you have for the council? I mean, obviously you got a copy of that yesterday on what the recommendations were to try to keep everybody at the midpoint or 3% based on the job description data provided. Any thoughts?
I already heard the council's answer is consistency, so I don't think there's any change in anything that's been decided, so really don't have a discussion for the fact that there's a reason why the jail staff is the jail staff, or correction staff is what we refer to them as mostly, is that they're interchangeable. And that's not reasonable by what council sees. When you have people that are ill up here or can't come to work, take vacation, you will absolutely have somebody from corrections come over and do this job. And vice versa, we will have them come over on a slow day from court and do transports and work in a jail. I have a sheriff that spent X amount of years as sheriff on our council that understands the interchangeability of every officer that's in that facility. And the umbrella that we created was that we would have that, so that we're never short at either place. That each one could go do the job of the other. But it falls on deaf ears, and you talk about a salary survey, these were filled out by employees and provided back, and then put in a pile and sent to whatever company was contracted to do. But it still sometimes doesn't capture everything that is included in a job. Because today is a different day. We have new people, we have different things that are gonna happen every day, whether it's inside the correctional facility or whether it's gonna be at the courthouse. So I understand your consistency and your request to be consistent. It's just like maintenance. I probably don't have another supervisor with a $13,000 difference from the person that they supervise. That doesn't seem consistent at all.
Do you think that the gap is high or low?
Well, I would say that it's high, the difference in the position. Yeah, there's supervisory roles that they do, but I don't think we have a supervisor that makes $13,000 more than a subordinate anywhere in that building, other than maybe my salary.
Oh, in your building, I was thinking all
Top maintenance. Yeah. Maintenance is the building.
Well, I know, but I thought you meant throughout the county. So I was.
We
Cecily-
don't look at those budgets.
I don't have it. I don't go to county highway and ask them, what do your supervisors make? What is the guy that just does the work on, as the laborer? What's he make? I don't go to county highway that because it's not my concern. My concern is my own office.
So Sheriff, let me stop for just a second, because I want to ask for a question for clarification, because part of what Cecily, you and I talked about, so maybe it's appropriate to talk in the big setting. There were some limitations to, like, FLSA. A corrections officer had specific
So that's-
restrictions, we were banging our heads against some legal things.
So this categories, I questioned why civil process and courthouse security came back differently, like in a different category. And the explanation I got was they don't fall, when you're not working in the jail, in a locked facility or whatever, as your primary function, they don't consider them to be at the same risk and different things as they do the corrections officers. So they put them in a different category.
You'll
So
be
they-
knocking on doors.
So who is
for-
they, number one?
The firm that does.
The firm.
Yeah.
Now, corrections officers versus officers killed that are out there on the street. Civil process people they carry a gun, right? Okay, you understand that. They are serving papers. They can serve warrants when needed if that person is standing there. They are effectively going to do the same job as a police officer, but we separate them from a merit deputy and pay them quite a bit less, but they have the same responsibilities when the emergency comes. But a firm, wherever they're from, I get what they're saying, and I see how the mindset behind it, but I'm asking for common sense here at this level. This person goes out every day, puts on a gun belt, wears body armor. If he wasn't in harm, I wouldn't buy him body armor. If he wasn't in harm, when sometimes he has to take people into custody. And if you ask that civil service person, when we're not doing the work for the courts, there's an expectation that he goes and comes and does the work with the corrections facility. But these arguments have all fallen on deaf ears because we're gonna be consistent with what a maintenance person makes it that place or another part of the county and consistent.
That's not true.
I don't get it. I just don't get the understanding that you don't think that this person's is in as much danger as a person that's inside the facility.
It's
Well, let's
not
get something
me
straight. It's
personally.
not Cecily.
That's-
So let's not go there.
But I'm talking to her.
I
and
know.
We're already there. So I'm
But-
letting you know my feelings on it because you asked. And I'm
So-
giving you my perspective on why we ask for this and for people to have the same pay, because there are definitely times when they're doing the same job or a different part of the
But
job.
they base everything on your primary function. If we based everybody's salary on what they do occasionally, or they do 25% of the time, we would never have
Sure.
true.
And I understand that.
So that's.
But I don't think you gave the authority to this firm, you, the rest of the council, to make your decisions for you.
No, they did not.
Thank you. I'm
But
done with that.
I want to point out, the surveys that were filled out by the employees were signed off by you guys, the department head.
Sure.
So the information that was used to gather all of that came from your department and
Well,
yourself.
to be fair though, we didn't have the information on these blocks and categories to
add or make
modify
sure.
or to ensure completeness, so to speak, on our end. When you say they fall into a different category, I don't have any idea what that means. I haven't seen any documentation on
I
that.
don't know whether I didn't have an idea of what their decision or their points of decision making on where they would classify people.
But their
Because I don't know this
duty-
company.
and what you
I
were
get it.
filling
And I've
out-
never been through one of these like that and that in depth.
But you
I don't
shouldn't have been
understand.
filling out job description surveys based off of trying to make salaries higher or to go into a different category. We're trying to base them off of true primary functions. And, you know, the difference in the hours is a big deal. You know, if you do the math, if you're paying the same salary to the civil process and courthouse security that you're paying to the corrections officers, you're actually cheating the corrections officers, and they're not making the same. So, because if you divide it out, and if you have them, you know, I understand and we all appreciate the fact that you guys make sure there's always somebody here. It doesn't matter if it's Greg or if it's Brant, there's always somebody out there. But at the end of the day, the person that's filling in out here, they're working their 84 in a pay period versus the other. So it's, I get wanting to be interchangeable because it's easy, but when you're looking at it from like the financial and the HR and all of that point of view, you're basically,
Well, it's not really interchangeable because it's easy. They're all required the same amount of training, the same, he is trained the same as he is trained, and he makes more because he's the assistant commander. And, you know, if I had civil process sitting in here, he goes through the same defensive tactics, the same firearms, the same amount of training, because they're special deputies. Really, all these categories should be special deputies, but that's another nightmare we're not gonna get into. So, what, interchangeable is one thing, yes, but they go through everything. I mean, arguably, they have the same training as deputies, really.
I can't, I mean,
Yeah, I think we're getting in the
I
weeds
think
on
the
this.
salary
Sure.
I
should be
understand the
back higher.
consistency of
If-
what you guys are trying to gain.
It's
I
just,
understand.
I mean, it's the consistency portion.
There will be another budget year.
Yeah.
We should work on it. This isn't,
Sure.
This isn't
end
to
of
be
the
the final, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Go ahead,
I just
Carol.
want to say a couple things. First of all, what I basically stated was what the committee decided. The council hasn't made their final decision yet. It was a recommendation
Oh, I understand
to the
that.
council. So it's not done yet. So you're doing exactly what you need to be doing. You need to be telling us why you don't like it or why you don't appreciate
that's
it.
why we're
The
here, so
first
you don't
thing,
need to
the
explain.
first thing I want you to do to help me was, would you introduce me to your staff that's here? I'd love to know who they are and what they do. What they
This
do.
is Jacob Nelson, he's our training supervisor, newly promoted. He came from the floor, he was a shift supervisor on nights. It's our assistant jail commander, Chase Miller. This is our classification officer, Robin Ford.
Okay.
It's our jail commander, Natasha Douglas.
Hi, Natasha.
It's our chief deputy, Sean Mayfield. And it's our captain, Matt Myers.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Welcome.
I'm glad you're all here today, and I appreciate the work you do in the county. Appreciate it.
It's good for people to see the process.
The other thing I'd like to say is that the firm that did this survey, they do specialize, they don't do private sector. So, I mean, they specialize in county government, and they do, I think, 88 of the counties in Indiana. So I feel like that they know what they're doing as far as classifications and from that area. It's not like we just picked some firm to come.
So to go back to a comment you made, I did pay them to make a recommendation to me because they have the expertise that I don't have on how to review a job, create and review and determine the proper compensation for a job description. And I do think they did a good job based on the information they had. If we didn't do that process, if we need to have a do-over and an amendment to those job descriptions, let's do that, let's review those.
Absolutely.
But I think that's gonna be for the 2026 budget year, not for now. I feel like everybody did what they were paid, in the case of the consultant, to do, based on the information that they got.
Yeah, everybody had the same information.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's where I'm at. You make good points, and I can't, I'm hard pressed to argue against them, but I'm also want to defer to the people that are trying to keep us legally compliant and have that expertise. So I'm going to open it up to anybody else on the council that we've heard from Cecily and from Carol. Mary, anything you want to add from your time on the committee?
It's been difficult.
Yeah.
You know, every department, we have seen areas where it would have been nice to take people to the high point or, make special exceptions. But in the end, for this year, we just felt like it was best. At least we've got a starting point for years to come.
And I guess to be clear, that you're not the only department we've had this tough discussion with. We've had others that we've had to have the same heated exchange with. I won't call it heated, but serious discussion with. So I don't want to feel like that this department was singled out in any way.
Let me ask you this, where is the council sitting on longevity pay?
It's in.
Okay.
I mean, that'll answer once the budget's approved. And I completely understand where we're at with a company that's never been used and, and where you're at when you had, I had the ability to sit with a one-man show that was our HR. One-man show that made a recommendation to council. And I get it, moving to a company that does a broad research, and I don't have any issues with that whatsoever. But I also, I've got to fight for my people.
Understood.
And it's one of those things where, the expectation is always there for our community. But we don't look at the backside of it and what these people are compensated, what every member of the sheriff's office puts out there. So, you know, when we talk about safety, and it's not an attack on Cecily, but it's an attack on just the generality of what a person goes and does for a living. And, you know, I don't think we have any, you know, change in our community that is going to make it any safer or any more dangerous, but it's one of those things where these guys go out and gals go out and face the dangers every day. So that's where we're at, and I'm ready to move on because, you know, and I understand what's going to happen for this budget year. I get it, and, you know, and that'll open the conversation for next year's budget. So I understand.
I view it as that we've reached a marker post, and we're going to adjust to here, and then we're going to continue the discussion. And, you know, the whole idea is to eventually get to the correct spot. And I feel like we're a lot closer now than we were before, is frankly how I
And we
feel.
also anticipate there'll be an open time for reclassifications of jobs. And we expect people, all the departments, to come back to us and ask for new job descriptions and ask for reclassifications. And that's part of our program too, that the survey is allowing that to happen. So we anticipate this coming year to hear some of those things. So we know it's not been easy. It's not been easy for us as we've had these discussions. Sometimes we're going backwards and forwards, and this is getting murkier and murkier. So
I appreciate your passion, and I appreciate your input. So, with that being said, we're kind of at the same point that we were with the other. We've heard from the department head, we've heard from the committee, and because the committee's recommendation is a change to what was advertised, we would need a motion to accept the recommendation of the committee to make that change to the budget. So I'd need a motion to that effect if that's what the council feels.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Carol to accept the committee's report. I have a second by Jeff. Does anybody have any last questions, comments, clarifications, anything from Sheriff or Matron prior to the vote? Okay, seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. Anything else that this council needs to discuss on this budget or any other budget for anyone that's in the room before we conclude today's hearing?
So we're just going to stay midpoint as is.
We've made that adjustment to all budgets.
Reflection on 26.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you all for, especially the committee members, for your additional work that you've put in over the last couple of weeks to give us those recommendations. And Cecily, Britt, Janet, everybody in the auditor's office, thank you for the extra work you put in through this whole process.
Yeah.
It's very much appreciated.
Lots of work.
Continue to work forward to get to our final destination. So with that being said,
Good job.
call the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Next week, by a reminder, we're at the airport next week.
Oh, we are.
Yes.
Oh, 'cause of
this is
voting.
early voting.
Thanks, Larry.
You picked a good committee to, you picked a good committee to get off of, too.
Did you know?